This is Secret Diary. Secret Diary is a podcast dedicated to discussing our experiences of the modern work environment across various sectors. Join me as I allow us to dive into insightful analysis and firsthand accounts of industry dynamics, where I share my goal to empower you to question conventional norms and help you participate in shaping inclusive and progressive workplace cultures, social cultures, the whole nine yards. I'm kind of trying to reshape the way I look at the podcast and kind of like the conversations that come out of it, because I feel like sometimes I don't just want to talk about labor organizing. I think sometimes there's a bigger conversation that needs to be had, one about, the the ever futile growing issues that happen in juxtaposition to the growing labor movement. There are so many other things that I'm passionate about as well. And one of them that I think does still obviously tie into organizing, because I think that most things inevitably do when you look at like taking an issue, making people care about it, and wanting to do something about it. Recently for me, it's kind of been this take on purpose and communicating effectively. So I think kind of like the theme for this episode, I want to dig into my struggles when it comes to communicating in a culture and a society in which good communication is boring to people or it is tedious. So I kind of grew up in an environment where I constantly needed to over communicate. So I think before I started organizing, I kind of already had this skill set. Started at a young age, having to like translate for my grandparents in moments, or having to like kind of work my way around like my parents not fully understanding what I meant in certain contexts, because they just didn't get like the deeper nuances of English and the English language. There was just like those little things that kind of always forced me to over communicate. And while this is kind of a skill that can aid and help in the long run, it's also something that can feel almost like a double-edged sword, because sometimes I find myself over communicating still in situations where I could honestly save the energy. I think I have a little bit of this inherent need as like an organizer, as somebody who's passionate about eliciting change and seeing somebody think a little bit more complexly about how their work life balance affects them, and just kind of how in an extension of the things we miss or the things we might not pick up affect us at work, where in our lives are other areas that things might affect us that we're not picking up on and we don't know how to cope with. So one of those things for me recently has been noticing that a lot of the people in my life come to me and they kind of lack external motivation. They lack the ability to really like take their situation and know what to do with it, and where to go from there. And I think it's like we're so overwhelmed with life, where there's so much going on in the world, that it's kind of hard to like sit and meditate with yourself and really think about yourself and care about yourself. So I kind of wanted to lay out some of the ways I think communicating and knowing when you're over communicating, or when something is just like not worth your energy, kind of little tips and tricks and things that I find myself doing, and like just my general thoughts on communicating with other people and living in a culture where that can kind of bite you in the ass when you're somebody who's a little bit too self-aware, I like to say. But I think the first thing to acknowledge when it comes to the way we speak to each other and the way we talk to one another is often there's like this personal underlying message. Like when someone doesn't understand us, when somebody doesn't know where we're coming from, and they're really like frustrated because they want us to see something a certain way. I've used to really struggle with feeling misunderstood and not feeling heard, and there are even are moments where it's like too much for me to confront the problem in the moment, but I might, walk away from a conversation feeling like, I feel like we didn't really get a good clear understanding of one another's perspectives, and now I'm walking away and I feel like, what was there to gain from this interaction if not just leaving us all the more confused? um, I feel like in those moments, I really have to come back to myself and I really have to remind myself, like, who was the conversation for, if not for two people to just practice the art of understanding one another, the art of just not of agreeing to disagree, of seeking, com- it's all in the attempt, it's all in the effort. And I think when I do walk away from conversation like that, I often ask myself, like, what is it that I could have done to have gotten us to a better resolution? Sometimes there is not a reason. Like sometimes a conversation goes both ways. So you might be giving in energy and you might be expending your efforts and your skills and your great communication just for you to kind of be met with a brick wall. I always have to remind myself not to take it personally. Some people just aren't there to share the space with you, and it's good to have that level of discernment when you're going and you're approaching people and members of your community, and you have this idea or you have this like true, I want to say, like, project that can come of the conversation, but it just ultimately doesn't lead to something you can both see eye to eye on. And I think in those moments, it's perfectly fine to drop this topic, to drop this project, and leave room for the opportunity to come about again, or for something to come and make it more open ended. I think great communication stands at understanding where somebody is at level wise. Maybe I make plans with a friend and we're not able to come to a good resolution on like when we can hang out and what we're open to doing, and maybe it's just not that moment, maybe it just isn't that time to connect and see each other, and maybe we can just look for a further date. But also sometimes people are aren't eager to plan things. They're not eager to prioritize that relationship, this project, this idea. And I think for me, I just like to remind myself that it's okay. It'll pass, it'll come and it'll go, and there'll be plenty of opportunities for us to connect in a different way, in a new way, in a fun way. I think a lot of the stuff that I enjoy about conversations and connecting with people is getting to know the things that they care about. So when I'm communicating with somebody and I can tell we don't see eye to eye, I like to at least make note of the things about them that I do understand and that I do know, and kind of build their values and keep them in my brain and kind of try to remember, so the next time we do have an opportunity to have a conversation, to connect, I'm not doing it in like a superficial way. I'm not coming to them because of something that just like I want to hear or I want to say. It's a mutual exchange, if not a little bit more like willing to hear what is going on with them and what is kind of going through their mind, especially when I'm at work. I think to know your coworkers is to know your network, to know your community. And that extends like all areas of your life where you frequent and where you might find yourself like being around a lot of the same people, I think you do yourself a disservice when you don't take the time to get to know them. And I get it, not everybody wants to go to work and talk and chat up all their coworkers, but I think having like a good understanding of like their life and the things that are important to them and their values is a really strong skill to have, because when you care about people, they'll care about you, and not in a manipulative way, in a genuinely taking the time to participate with the people around you and find that inner circle. So I think when it comes to the bare bones of how I enjoy communicating with people, and kind of like how organizing in itself is like a stream of constant communication, it's being able to discern that you don't need to agree with everyone. You don't need to come to the same conclusion. It doesn't always lead to a plan, but you leave with an idea about and more information about that person that could help you really figure out what it is that's important to them, what it is that they value, and, you know, make an effort to connect and to keep a line of communication going if that's something that you're open to. I also want to preface by saying, like, I'm a fairly extroverted person. I do expend a lot of energy in my external relationships. As much time as I spend internally, I would like to say, but at moments I feel like I get a little overwhelmed and I get a little bit caught up in my external life. And when I say external, internal, you know, I'm just kind of thinking about the amount of time that I spend generating and regenerating. So I think, like I said, kind of practicing to know when sometimes conversations aren't meant to be had, or I don't. It doesn't always need to be so daunting and serious. Sometimes it can just be like aloof and fun and more lighthearted. So for me, that's definitely something that helps kind of fulfill this purpose I have to have strong community around me and to feel in kinship with the people that I get to see every single day. And I think working such a social job, sometimes I get really kind of like in a headspace where it's hard for me to connect with the people outside of my work environment or not within like my work bubble, because I'm just, you know, often around customers that I'm interacting with every single day and my coworkers who I talk to often. And I think that a lot of people could probably relate if you work in like a job where you're kind of expected to constantly be like facing customers and constantly be talking. Um, it's a lot, you know, it's a lot to deal with. Being a service worker, you're kind of on the receiving end of a lot of other people's bad days and brunt moods, but also, you know, other some amazing days or regular days. So you get to really see a huge spectrum of the human condition, of the way that people kind of go their day to day. You are a part of their routine, but you're being paid to be there. You're being expected to do a task, a service. So it definitely can feel a little transactional and not as authentic as a regular conversation. So in those moments, I just really try to ground myself and come into like the moment and like be like, we're all human beings, we're all cogs in this machine, and we have to keep brewing coffee and making drinks, and, you know, in spite of everything else that is going on, it's just kind of like you have to keep going and to keep persevering. And I think it's hard to not get stuck in like a loop when you're doing this. It's hard not to feel like I'm talking about the same things, or I'm talking about like the same surface level conversations with like people who often aren't speaking to anybody else but you that day. You know, people who come in and grab their coffee because it's like one of their favorite parts of the day, and it can feel like you can feel it sometimes. You can feel like when someone doesn't get the exact interaction that they were expecting or wanted. And I think it's hard to even know what somebody wants until they're getting passive aggressive with you, even though, you're just trying to get them their items efficiently, or you're trying, to service them. There's kind of like this confusion that lingers, and it's because of a lack of communication. There's like this weird gray neutral zone when you are kind of giving somebody the service, and you're obviously have to be like polite and happy and chipper, but you are also like, this is 103, 104, 105 customers that I've had to service today. And it just feels like sometimes you don't get a chance to be human. Like they want their experience, they want their interaction, and so it can feel really mentally draining for me. But in those moments, I like to just kind of take a breather, like feel the let myself feel a little bit tired, in those moments, because it's only natural, it's only normal, and obviously communicating that with the people around you so that it doesn't get taken in the wrong way. But yeah, no one's perfect, and I think like the goal should never be to be perfect. I think it should always be to just authentically communicate. It doesn't need to be like over communicated. It can just be like, I'm so tired today. Like, it's just one of those days. And it can feel good, to feel like you don't have to pretend. You don't have to act like everything's fine when you're overwhelmed, or when you just don't really feel like being the peppiest version of yourself. That's really okay. And I think sometimes when you work in service, it's like made and chalked up to be like you're just like not, like, you just seem so miserable, you just seem so unhappy, as if people don't get overwhelmed and don't feel a little bit drained sometimes when they're, doing this kind of similar thing every single day. That's why I also think it's really important to kind of switch up roles, or switch up little things throughout your week, so that when you're decompressing, or when you're kind of finding yourself in one of those slumps, you're able to kind of self regulate. I recently have been like walking and meditating. I love just doing nothing and being a little bit bored, especially if it's like me transporting from place to place, from work just to the gym, just, to back to the apartment, like things like where I can just kind of like breathe and be like, this is life, this is the world, this is how we're living it. Um, I know a lot of people feel overwhelmed, and I can definitely feel that way too. So I don't mean this in like a take my positivity and let it like radiate over you. I mean, like, if you feel genuinely like miserable about things, if you feel genuinely like upset about the position that you're in, reflect on it. Like, don't pretend, tell somebody. Genuinely like come and embrace the low mood, because I think something I had to learn while I was, balancing and figuring out how to be a strong organizer and just be like an efficient leader and worker for the people around me, was tapping into those bad days, tapping into those terrible moods, because you have to know yourself. You have to accept the parts of yourself that aren't positive and radiating all these like, you're not a robot. You're not a robot. And I think sometimes when you work a service facing role and you're expected to like greet everybody who comes in the door, speak and have an like a real conversation with everybody who walks in the door, it's not realistic, and it's frankly like dehumanizing and demoralizing. I have so many moments where I'm leaning forward, going like above and beyond to like, make sure somebody feels positively about our interaction, and they still don't, because it's not just about you. It has to two people show up to the interaction, two people come through and they make the moment. It's not just your sole responsibility. And I think it's really like old school and kind of like I think it's pretty unrealistic, and it puts a lot of pressure on the worker who is already doing like more than the tasks than they're being asked simply to, service. So I know plenty of people that just get overwhelmed. They can't stand it and they leave, they quit and they're over it. It's not for everybody. It's not for the faint of heart. And, there's so many people who say it's like a skillless job. And I commend you because it definitely may not be like computer science or anything at high ed, but it's definitely its own level of work and it requires its own skill set. And most of it is kind of like endurance and being able to find this balance, but also being human. Any job, any kind of sector, any industry, you're going to find yourself in positions where you're feeling overworked and burnt out if the expectations that are placed onto you don't meet your quality of life and they don't meet your needs. It's only natural, it's only normal. So I think this week, while I practice communicating and I practice tuning in with myself and kind of letting myself know when I'm just not in the mood and I'm just not the happy go lucky person that I usually am, that it's fine. It's okay because life can get really overwhelming. And if you're constantly playing this role with yourself that you need to be and act a certain way to feel like yourself instead of just embracing how you feel in the moment and who you are in that moment, you'll be miserable. You'll be so disappointed and dissatisfied with where you're at instead of just being present and being grounded and understanding that I can be in a bad mood. I can be annoyed and frustrated because I'm a human being. And anybody who tells you differently, any kind of higher authority who tries to put you down for simply expressing human emotions, for not being a robot, for not being a workhorse, let them know. Be so blunt, be so brutally honest. Be like, you know what? I actually am feeling really anxious around doing X, Y, and Z task or X, Y, whatever it is. I would love if I could be given like a break, a little bit of some slack. And I guarantee you that while not everybody may react positively, you will feel great about standing up for yourself and saying what you actually think and saying what you truly are feeling in that moment, because the worst thing they can do is say that they don't get it instead of saying they didn't know months, weeks, years later when you're burnt out and you are suffering even more so because you never found or felt like it was a safe space to open up. Be a safe space. Make the safe space yourself simply by just being authentic in your communication, being vulnerable, being honest. For lack of a better word, I think like it's radical, that in itself. True, genuine human communication, true companionship and authenticity, even with people who are giving you pushback, even with people who do not want to participate with you, it's radical. It is truly a skill and it shows grace for yourself, and you will reap the rewards of being somebody who is unafraid to communicate in a way that feels authentic to you. And it can help you be a better discerner for others and how they're communicating and kind of picking up on, the things that they're struggling with and being like, you know what? I have those moments too, just like me. And this person and I got into a disagreement. They said some things to me I didn't care for, just like me. Because I'm sure there are moments where you say things other people probably don't care for. And I think that's like the beauty of and duality of it all is like, it is what it is. Whatever's in your control is what's in your control. And whatever's outside of it, don't be afraid to remind people that it is not your problem. But yeah, that was kind of a shorter rant series spliff about communication and just kind of what's been on my mind a little bit this week. I don't know how frequently I'll be able to keep up like one episode per week, simply because I'm going to start school soon and that'll be its own challenge and balance. But I'm hoping that having guests on, I can probably split episodes up a little bit better. Excuse me. Having guests on, I can split the episodes. I'm hoping that having guests on eventually will help me to split the episodes up a little bit better, so it's less taxing for me to have to do by myself. But I'm always happy to get on here and chat with you guys and talk a little bit about anything that's on my mind and anything that'll encourage you to kind of bring new ideas, new conversations into your workplace, into your life, and your friendships, your family conversation, anything. I really encourage you to be strong communicators and attune yourself to your preferred communication style in whatever moment, in whatever time you need it to be met at. No rush, no expectation. I'm your host, Ari. I tried so hard to not get frustrated at the camera, not focusing for most of the video. I'm deeply, truly sorry. I wish I had a better webcam. But I'm on that barista salary. So thank you guys so much for watching. I was your host, Ari, and this was Secret Diary. I hope to see you guys next time.